Hey guys, welcome to the pod. I'm Caden, and today we're going to be looking at this picture I did where I reworked an old sketch of this squirrel warrior guy. Same style as the very first pod episode I did of that owl. But before we jump in, I want to explain this series a little bit better. So I record the process of me creating this artwork, and then I go back, almost like game footage. I go back and review where I went wrong and where I went right. This helps me to grow as an artist and as a person, to be able to critically analyze my work and figure out where I can improve. And I thought it would be good to take you guys along for the ride so that I can share with you some of what I've learned in my career as an artist. That being said, let's talk about this piece a little bit. So I started out with this sketch. So the first thing I did was change the silhouette of the sketch. The first sketch that I did, the silhouette is very round and hard to read. And as I explained in my first episode, the silhouette is very important. And I want that to be kind of the focus of this episode, is the silhouette of the design of a character. So when I reworked this sketch, I wanted it to be a lot more readable than the original. If I got just the silhouette of the last sketch, this is what it would look like. Very round, hard to read. Honestly, you can't tell what's going on. What is this even a picture of? But if we look at the new sketch that I reworked, you can see it's a lot more readable. You can actually see what he's holding, see his stance. This helps the piece as a whole to be more readable and more eye-appealing for the viewer. Now, having a bad silhouette is not the end of the world. There are ways to work around it. You can break up the silhouette as a whole with these mini silhouettes within the piece. By creating layers to the character, you can break up the silhouette as a whole. Because I'll admit, even the new sketch is hard to read at times. But if you notice, I put the shield and the tail on clear separate layers, clear separate silhouettes. This helps break up that silhouette into layers. This is in an attempt to make the piece more readable and to create contrast. And contrast is arguably the most important principle of design, at least in my eyes, because there are many different ways to form contrast, not just with values. When used correctly, contrast's singular goal is to serve the focal point and help guide the eye of the viewer around the piece. So when creating a silhouette, contrast can be used to break it up, adding layers of silhouettes. Obviously, you want to be careful with this. If you add too many layers, too many little silhouettes, they all just mush together. It gets way too complicated, way too crowded of a picture for my style. That's why it's so important to focus on the silhouette as a whole first, and then using the mini silhouettes within the piece to add to that silhouette. The shield and the tail are a good example. I actually end up moving the tail around. You'll see. I move that tail around. But these are the three main silhouettes. The shield, which is very simple, just an ellipse. The body, which is the main silhouette, and then the tail, which is almost like a backdrop. These three mini silhouettes are what make up the character as a whole. They work off of one another and contrast from one another. As I was working on this picture of this squirrel warrior, try saying that, squirrel warrior, I realized it was lacking a major focal point. Nothing was really standing out. I tried to make the face the focal point, but I'm not good at drawing squirrel faces, so I thought I would try to take a little bit of attention away from the face. And I did that, one, by adding this ornate axe in his hand, but also I end up adding almost a chrome cap to his shield. This is to make it a little more cohesive with the owl picture that I drew in my first episode, because I want this to be a collection of animal warriors. Going back to contrast really quick, if you notice, I blurred the tail quite a bit. I mushed a lot of the shapes together and a lot of the values. A lot of it's blended together. No sharp edges or angles. This is to help separate it from the creature and from the silhouettes and layers in front of it, because the lines in the shield and in the squirrel are very sharp, very in focus. The tail I want to be lost in the background, so I made it pretty fuzzy. I mean, that's easy to do with a squirrel tail. It's fuzzy in the first place. But I wanted to show you how I use different contrast other than just value. So I think that'll be it for today's episode of the pod. Thank you for joining. I know this one was a little bit shorter, but if you like this kind of content, please let me know with a comment or a like. That really goes a long way. Thanks, guys.